do you feel like a responsibility when you're writing to sort of reflect that you have such a deep respect for these people that you have to write that in a way that sort of portrays that in an accurate sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had villains who are U.S. military or U.S. government people or stuff like that, and I've had people like complain about that. Like they want all the bad guys to have accents.
Right.
Can't be Americans. But I mean, it's just like there are all walks of life all over the place. But I do feel a responsibility to, again, it's sort of the fanboy in me. It's like I have such respect for these people and what they do, and the responsibility they have often at very young ages. It's a fascinating thing to me to write about and to talk about. And again, it's just I like to build stories around reality, and then at some point go off, where the guy's jumping off an airplane and without a parachute and finding a way down.
When you're researching villains and corruption, like do you have you ever met with people that are corrupt? Have you met with like real villains? Like, are you just getting this from your imagination?
No, I haven't. I mean, a lot of reading. My new book involves Russian mafia / Russian government, which are one and the same, in my opinion. And so I'm looking at real cases. I actually had finished the book, and it involves Americans who are being influenced by Russia or taking money from Russian foreign intelligence, and Americans in government. And just a couple weeks ago, this guy, FBI guy in New York, who was like head of counterterrorism at one point, but he was also involved in the sanctions, Russian sanctions. He just got indicted for taking money from Oleg Deripaska, which is one of the oligarchs that Putin supports or supports Putin, or both. And these things happen, and they just caught a Russian GRU guy that was about to intern at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And they just caught a German BND, the German Foreign Intelligence, Bundesnachrichtendienst, guy who had been spying for the Russians for a long time. And like all that stuff's really fascinating to me. So I want to learn about it as much as I can, and then write a fictional version of it. And I'd actually written this book before these three things came out, but I mean, the Russians have been doing stuff like that for a while. So.
Yeah, it's disturbing when you find someone like that. Like is this the same guy, the guy that was a part of going after Trump for Russiagate, where it turned out that he was actually, and he got indicted for conspiring with Russia?
The American guy? No, that.
Yeah, do you know that guy?
Yeah.
The most recent one?
Yeah, not Manafort.
Jamie, see if you can find that guy. Do you know what I'm talking? You know it.
I'm not quite sure what you said.
There was a gentleman that was involved in Russiagate, involved in going after Trump for his ties with Russia, and it turns out that he was colluding with Russia, and that he was either colluding with oligarchs or there was something involved, and he was recently indicted.
That might be the same guy, because it was
probably the same
it
guy.
was an oligarch connection.
Yeah,
but
probably the same guy.
That's the people that have the money outside of the U.S. So outside of Russia. So those are the people that are going to be paying you off.
Yeah, that was one of the more wild things about the beginning of the Ukraine war, where they were going after the oligarchs and taking their yachts.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's fascinating.
Well, my book, Burner, opens with court blowing up Russian yachts just as something to do, just as a side gig, and then he gets pulled into the main part of the story. I was down in St. Lucia researching it, and these people came ashore in some kind of a tender from a big yacht. They were all Russian. I don't know anything about their story. They could have been totally on the up and up, but I'm like, that's fascinating. And the war had been going on for a few months, but those boats are still out there.
Well, the Russian thing is so fascinating in general, right? You have Putin, who's this former KGB guy who's in charge of the entire country, and all the oligarchs have to be with him.
Yeah, they're 100% with him. They hold his money, and he allows them to do what they do, and they allow him to do what he does. And the war isn't affecting their children or anything like that. It's the kids from the Urals or the the stands, or like somewhere out in Siberia, those are the ones that are getting thrown into the meat grinder, or prisoners, or things like that they're doing. And so Putin knows how to protect his the people that support him and he supports. And it's a mafia, it's a kleptocracy. He's an autocratic kleptocrat, and it's just it's a criminal enterprise, and he doesn't care how many people die. He will continue. They're just putting waves of people through with no training. They had this mobilization last fall, and tens of thousands of them are just running across fields getting killed. It's World War I stuff. It's awful.
And not only that, they have a crematorium, a traveling crematorium.
Mm-hmm.
So they're literally just throwing these bodies into the burner, and they're not giving any sort of an account of how many losses that they've had.
There's a report that some Wagner troops were stacking their dead guys up as basically sandbags, and that's pretty awful if you think about it. This is a horrible war, and it was Putin really miscalculated. People in FSB told him what he wanted to hear, and they were supposed to be setting up influence operations in Ukraine for years and years, but they've been stealing the money. And then when he said, is this now the right time to do it? And they basically said, sure it is. And things went really bad. Their fifth service in FSB that does the foreign stuff, I think really dropped the ball, and not dropped the ball. I'm glad they dropped the ball, but I mean, they told him what he wanted to hear. I mean, if you're an autocrat like that, you value loyalty over competence, and you've got to have loyalty. People don't have to be competent, but they've got to be loyal for you to survive. And so as these incompetent people that were all stealing from the government, and they were also telling him, this is kind of this feedback loop. He was hearing what he wanted to hear. And
that's part of the problem too, right? That they're hearing what they want to hear because people are terrified to tell them bad news.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to go to Putin and say, we can't do this.
They say it's the same thing with Xi Jinping. That nobody wants to tell him the bad news, so he doesn't even find out about things that went wrong until quite a while later.
Yeah, and I imagine that's throughout history.